or amendment, but there were also opportunities for us to work together to deliberate and figure out what would make the most sense so that that issue can be addressed, but we wouldn't go bankrupt for doing it. And so with that, I submitted these proposals. I'll never forget the board president at that time, and you all can go back and watch this. Like, this is on YouTube. This is public information. I would not lie to you all about any of this. You can go back and watch the board president at that time urge my board colleagues not to support this proposal because and I don't remember the because, but it was, I urge you all not to support this, and for whatever reasons. And it may have had something to do with us not being able to afford it or whatever. But the bottom line is, it was that meeting when I realized that we were not aligning all of our budget allotments or allocations. We were not aligning that with the needs. And so one of the points that I brought up on the floor was, this is a consistent issue. It happens year after year after year. And given the issues with global warming or the concerns of global warming, this is not going to go away. This would make sense to invest in our buildings and get air conditioning. After making so many valid points, even like submitting data to support my points, having written testimonies by people in the community who also wanted to see this happen, having that support, they still voted it down. And I know that there were so many other things that I had proposed at that time. I remember it was teacher bonuses. I remember even having fun with one amendment, which I knew that it would not pass because I hadn't even worked with the union to even start to have these discussions, but about teacher salary compensation, increasing the compensation of teachers. It was so much that I was proposing, but in my mind, in my very novice or inexperienced board governance mind at that time, I'm thinking like everybody else in the community. We got billions of dollars. What's an air conditioner or 2 or 3 or 5? And I thought that made sense because when I think about something that may seem so simple as air conditioning or cooling in our system, I'm thinking also about recruitment and retention. I'm thinking about daily average attendance, especially during a time when the early start schools would start. And so it made sense to me. But it also bothered me that everything was rejected because of it being suggested that the funds weren't there. And so I remember having, I scheduled multiple virtual budget work sessions with District 4 constituents. It was one particular board, town hall, where I had a budget listening session. And I remember a group of individuals approaching me about stealing. It was in upwards of $90-something million. And it was like, oh, you board members are being paid off to do this and to do that. And you board members stole this, that, and the other. And people like direct that type of stuff to board members because we are the ones that approve of the budget. And we're the ones that are supposed to know every intricate detail or whatever that pertains to the to funding and budgeting. And so that's the idea, at least. But having these individuals approach me, and also knowing that I wasn't the favorable one on the board, and also knowing that I didn't have that much support in the community or that legal backing, I took those matters very serious. And keep in mind too, this was like my first year and maybe 2 or so months in. And so I'm hearing the allegations. These individuals are approaching us or approaching me at town halls. They're holding signs up and doing things in the during the board meetings, and their concerns seem valid. And whether I agree with it or not, it's my responsibility as an elected official who's accountable to the community to follow through with this and to see to it that these matters are investigated, and if nothing else, show good faith effort on my part. And so I had a meeting with the Office of Accountability and Efficiency Leader, and it was a point where we started discussing the budget. And I recorded the conversation because I knew that I would not be able to, one, I wasn't comprehending all of the numbers and the different pools of funding and this, that, and the other. But two, I knew that I needed to go back and be able to accurately relay this information to my constituents, and specifically that group who was inquiring about missing or stolen or misallocated funding. And so my intentions were good, but the way I went about doing it perhaps was very distasteful. I had a town hall and I played a clip of the recording, and it was about 73 people on the town hall platform, and I wanted to use that as an explanation, or I wanted to use that as a tool to kind of walk people through how you understand the difference between the projected budget and the actual budget and everything that occurs within that process, and then how budget decisions are made, and what are these pools, like what it OPEB or reserve funds, like what does this stuff mean. I remember requesting at the time for an expert from the office to come and join the town hall because it was a virtual one. And I remember the CFO being the one that was referred to me to attend this town hall and to engage in these discussions, and I was not okay with that. And I wasn't okay with that, one, because I knew that what my constituents were requesting or demanding for a high, significant level of transparency and accountability, we were not going to get that from that side of the aisle. And so it needed to come directly from the offices that are in place to ensure this high level of transparency and accountability. And so I shared that, and that was almost 2 years ago. But more recently, it was posted and it started making its rounds on social media, and I know that people were reaching out to me asking me questions about this. And while I don't agree with how it was released, because there was limited context and it was somewhat misleading, but I do understand why this group posted what they did. And I understand why, because when we're talking about having a budget, since I've been on the board, we've had maybe, like, just off the top of my head, maybe 3.5 or $3.5 billion. And I'm just adding up the first year and the second year budget since I've been on the board. There's been about $3.5 billion. And if I'm thinking like the average constituent, I am not going on the MPS website to read a 900-page document detailing every line item, budget, schools, all of that. I'm not going to read through that. I may not even understand how to comprehend that, how to internalize it, and then how to the process and then act on it, right? But the other part is, even with the condensed version, if I'm not in that field, or if I don't have any special training or understanding of accounting on that level, I'm just not going to understand it. And so again, what I did was I used that to try to educate my constituents. I used that to try to give them the real, the raw, the uncut. And so I don't want to show or appear to be defensive or making excuses for why I did what I did. I will always stand with my community. I also know that was my first year, so mistakes were made. But I also don't want to miss the opportunity to take accountability or show accountability for doing something in a way that was distasteful. And so for that, I owe apologies to the Office of Accountability, the leadership, because of how I did things. I don't think that anyone has ever really questioned my intentions, but the way I have gone about things has caused the sense of or cause feelings of betrayal. And I don't ever want to cause that harm or be that leader that lacks integrity in that way. And so one of the first things that I wanted to do, because the harm was caused publicly, I wanted to make a public apology for how I disseminated that information, because it wasn't tasteful. Like, it was very distasteful. And I am eventually going to, not eventually, but I am going to sit down and have a conversation with that person and apologize in person, not because I think that it will change my stance or their stance or anybody else's stance for that fact, but I always want to make sure that when I'm wrong, I'm owning that. And I am correcting that and not doing it again. To jump to the next point, we are now at a position where we're talking about a $252 million referendum